Hey everyone, this is the second video for my main DPS Ningguang series. This time I'll be focusing on 5-star and 4-star weapons. Again, the analysis and rationale are based on the results from the damage comparison tool and will be more focused towards Constellation 2. If you want a brief introduction to the tool, check out my first video on artifacts. Unlike artifacts, new weapons get released more frequently and they come with more interesting effects in order to drive people to spend Primogems for them. In the current patch 1.2, we have three 5-star Catalyst weapons: Lost Period to the Secret Winds, Skyward Atlas, and the latest being Memory of Dust. With every weapon banner release, people are flooded with damage showcases, displaying the 5 seconds worth of maximum stacks in effect, perfectly timed procs, and perfect environment setups. Others just use the final stat numbers from the weapon effects at maximum stacks and do a comparison that way. These often skews the results as weapons like the Lost Prayer and Memory of Dust require certain conditions to build up their stacks. Although weapons like the Skyward Atlas and Wisif have long internal cooldowns that may change the overall DPS if we were to do comparisons based on a set time window. This is the primary reason why the tool was created in the first place. Damage comparisons should be done in a control setup such that the results are as fair as possible across the board. For the weapon tier list, I'll be using the same parameter as the artifact comparison video. However, this time I'm considering results from only the Archaic Gladiator set for simplicity's sake. Let's get onto the tier list. For 5-star Catalyst in terms of damage, we have at number 1, Lost Prairie of the Sacred Winds at maximum stacks. Number 2, Skyward Atlas. Number 3, Memory of Dust with Shield. Number 4, Lost Prairie with normal stacking. And number 5, MOD without shield. The percent increase shown on screen is comparing that particular weapon to the lowest performing weapon out of the group. As you can see, all of these 5-star weapon rankings are consistent across the constellation shown, with the exception of C0. At C0, Skyward Atlas is slightly ahead of Lost Prayer with stacks by about 1.3% and approximately 5% more damage than MOD with a shield. This may be due to the lack of AoE damage at C0, plus the AoE physical damage proc from Skyward Atlas pushes up its damage ahead of his peers. As a reminder, we are testing against 2 Fatui targets who have less physical resistance overall, as this was done for endgame Abyss content during patch 1.1. The damage percent difference between each weapon is minimal, approximately 3% at most. As we go up in Constellation, the gaps in damage percent difference do decrease. One thing to note, if you run buffs such as Bennett with Noblesse, Skyward Atlas's damage does increase since the proc takes a snapshot of your total attack at the moment of proc. For 4-star Catalyst, in terms of damage, we have number 1, Eye of Perception, number 2, Solar Pearl, 3, Wisith, 4, Blackcliff Agate with 1 stack, number 5, Frostbearer, number 6, Mapamere, and at 7, Prototype Malice or Favonius Codex. Again, the weapon rankings are fairly consistent across the constellations. Here I did separate weapons with offensive substat at the top and weapons without at the bottom, as there is a significant difference between the two groups. The damage percent difference between the weapons within the main group is approximately 4% at most. If you take a look at the raw damage numbers on screen, the lowest performing weapon in the offensive substat group, Frostbearer, is dealing 136k more damage than the top performing weapon in the non-offensive substat group, which is the Mapamere. The offensive substat group is just significantly better than the ones without. The Mapamere number shown here is assuming 2 stacks as well, and it still needs another 46% more damage to match Frostbearer without Cryo. Let's get on to the analysis. For 5-star weapons, the Lost Prayer at full stacks generally deals the most damage on paper. However, in typical gameplay, you are switching characters to either buff up, break shields, or break some sort of channeling. Thus, you're very unlikely to get to full stacks or stay there for a prolonged duration. This is mostly only applicable during co-op play or if you're lazy roaming in the open world. If you're one of those elite Ningguang players that solos Abyss for fun, then Lost Prayer is your best in slot. For the actual comparisons, I'll be referring to just the Lost Prayer damage from the summary. This accounts for the elemental damage stacks based on time, meaning it will reach full stacks at the 16-second interval. After the Lost Prayer at maximum stacks, Skyward Atlas deals the second most damage for most scenarios. Its damage will pull ahead further with buffs since the proc takes a snapshot of your attack stats at the moment of proccing. As mentioned previously, the test targets were set to be Fatuis, whose physical resistance are less than other mobs. Ranking may change if future Abyss content switches to enemies with higher physical resistance. Small disclaimer, I don't own a Skyward Atlas, so I can't test the reliability of the proc myself. Looking at videos, it appears to continuously do seeking non-elemental damage in a small AoE circle. For these comparisons, I gave it the benefit of the doubt that it lands the maximum 6 hits on all test targets. You can adjust it in the tool as you see fit. Based on the analysis, Memory of Dust with Shield is very comparable to Skyward Atlas if you can keep up a shield. It can overtake the Skyward Atlas in damage depending on how it performs and how many procs you get off. Here is a simple comparison between the two weapons. The top is without any buffs, and the bottom is Bennett and Noblesse buffed. The right column is showing the percent difference in damage when compared to the MOD with shield. In reality, the ranking of MOD with shield will differ depending on how grouped up enemies are and their HP status at the moment of proc. I just want to reiterate this test is done for average artifact quality. These rankings may end up changing as artifact quality improves and people reach the point where attack gain from Golden Majesty effect suffers greatly from diminishing returns. Memory of Dust does provide a 20% increase to shield strength, which nets you around 1500 HP at level 80. This is essentially a 10% HP buffer for my 15k HP Ningguang. In terms of potential damage, any 5-star weapon will be better than all 4-star weapon regardless of refinement level. There are, however, a couple of honorable mentions. The Blackcliff Agates at Refinement 5 with 3 stacks does more damage than MOD at R1 without shields. Eye of Perception at R5 and the Wisif with Elemental percent buff, they both get marginally close to MOD at R1 without shield. Eye of Perception is one of the top choice for 4-star weapons currently. Comparing its damage to the Solar Pearl, it is approximately 5% higher at C0, 2% higher at C2, and less than 1% difference at C6. Bear in mind this test was done on 2 targets. The proc takes an attack snapshot and it is physical damage, so the damage is slightly higher, similar to the Skyward Atlas. From personal testing, the bounce range is decent, approximately 3/4 of a Jade Screen's worth. So I've modeled it to hit once if it is single target, and hits maximum 4 times if there are 2 or more targets, as it will bounce back and forth between them. This setup is more realistic, since the most endgame Abyss content have minimum 2 enemies. Another thing of note is that other catalysts with proc effects hits in an AoE circle. Depending on which target you get the proc on and how grouped up they are, the full AoE damage might not reach other targets. For Eye of Perception, it is a lot easier to get the full maximum value out of the proc, since the bounce radius is a lot bigger than the AoE hit radius. Although this is a Refinement 1 comparison, I just want to note that EOP is one of the few or only catalysts whose proc cooldown decreases as refinement level increases. Hence its damage gets even more consistent with refinement upgrades. Solar Pearl is a decent second choice. Its damage is higher than Eye of Perception if you're only attacking single targets. There is a short interval where you won't have the 20% bonus to normal attacks prior to your second round of Jade Screens, but it is only several seconds. Its damage reaches close to EOP as your constellation gets higher, and may possibly even exceed it as artifact quality improves. If you're spending in the game, one benefit of Solar Pearl is that, since it's a Battle Pass weapon, you can get to Refinement 5 quite reliably as opposed to rolling gacha for EOP. Wisif is a semi-decent choice on paper. The damage shown is an average of the 3 procs. However, I believe its overall damage will decrease due to several reasons. Number 1, you generally have to switch in and out of character to break shields and channels in the Abyss. Number 2, it has a relatively long cooldown of 30 seconds. And lastly, its cooldown doesn't line up very well with other cooldowns in general. The effectiveness of this weapon is largely environment dependent, thus it is not very consistent damage. Blackcliff Agate is the actual best in slot for 4-star weapons in terms of raw damage, and it has the highest damage potential if you are godly at tracking kill timing and burst windows. For the ranking, I have shown the damage at 1 stack as this should be a fairly reasonable uptime. Again, you may adjust this on your own depending on your own skill level. Note that in the tool, the attack percent stacks don't kick in until after your first star shatter, since the 1 normal attack plus 1 Jade Screen before it is unlikely to kill anything in later Abyss floors. The new 1.2 Catalyst Frostbearer is the best choice for free-to-play craftables. You get the recipe for it upon reaching level 10 on the Frostbearing tree in the new Dragonspine region. The Icicle proc deals physical damage, so the same general rule as Atlas and Eye of Perception applies. It isn't really necessary to switch characters to apply Cryo, as the overall damage increase only by approximately 3%. There is no need to go out of your way to try to maximize the physical damage Icicle, as you're losing in damage uptime for switching characters. Craft this if you're free to play, as it is still significantly better than the non-offensive substat options. Mappamare, Prototype Malice, and the Favonius Codex, all of these weapons are significantly worse since they lack an offensive substat. For the ranking, I have shown Mappamare at 2 stacks, and it is still nowhere close to the worst 4-star from the offensive substat group. Use Mappamare since it has a higher base attack than the other two if you're free to play and has crafted this already, but craft the Frostbearer as soon as you get the recipe and the Catalyst prototype. You shouldn't need the energy regen from the Prototype Malice or the Favonius Codex for a main DPS build. At the making of the comparison tool, I skipped sacrificial fragments because I was playing around with it and dropping 3 consecutive jade screens and just forgot about it. Overall, this is subpar as well, as it also lacks an offensive substat. It should do less damage than the Mappamare, but more than the Prototype and Codex, as you have a chance to drop more jade screens. One thing to mention, similar to your C2 jade screen resets, the additional jade screen from the sacrificial fragment doesn't seem to generate any energy particles. I skipped the Royal Grimoire because I think the effect requires some Monte Carlo simulation / calculation to determine the actual effective crit rate percent, and I didn't pay that much attention in school. I know there are others that probably have the data model already, but I probably need some time to digest it. I'm not sure if this matters in the big picture. Math experts can probably shed more insights on this, but gut feeling tells me the effective crit rate percent should be fairly accurate on Ningguang. Both Ningguang's Q and Lisa's E have over 1000% total damage multiplier, but Ningguang does multiple small hits that crit individually, whereas Lisa does one big hit. If Lisa misses that one big hit, her overall damage may skew significantly. I think the law of large numbers apply to the number of hits, however there should be some additional weights applied to the hits for an actual damage comparison. Now that we've gone through some of the details on the weapons, let's go on to the summary. If I have my choice of 5-star weapons, I would definitely pick the Memory of Dust over the other two. Referring back to the Skyward Atlas versus MOD comparison, even if we assume Skyward Atlas's proc reliably hits multiple targets, you cannot really control when this proc happens, and thus the damage output will vary. Proccing during a Venti burst at the beginning of the fight where the entire room is gathered and at full HP will net you the highest potential damage, but proccing on the last mob with 10% HP is a complete waste, and then you're stuck with a 30-second cooldown. On the other hand, Lost Prayer to the Sacred Winds simply doesn't get to full strength fast enough, even if we ignore certain game environment factors requiring us to switch characters. The damage at full stacks does not outperform damage with a support buff, and current buff cooldowns are relatively low, thus you'll always have a reason to switch character. Now I've played Ningguang since day 1, so I'm fairly used to picking up crystals. With the upcoming Geo buff, I don't see a reason not to run Zhongli with my Ningguang 99% of the time. For those who are new to Geo, just try to dash in the direction of a crystal every few attacks. Overall, MOD stack mechanics provides the most consistent and controllable output regardless of situation. For 4-star weapons, Eye of Perception and Solar Pearl are both good choices due to their consistent damage output. EOP's proc does very good damage, is less reliant on grouping, and its cooldown decreases as refinement goes up. I would definitely use EOP if I need the other Battle Pass weapons for different characters, if not Solar Pearl since I can reliably refine it. Despite Blackcliff Agate having such a high potential, I don't think it's worth investing the Star Glitter at the moment, as getting certain 4 stars to C6 is likely more critical. Also, if you can afford the Star Glitter to get this refinement 5, odds are you can afford a 5-star weapon instead. I hope you find this Ningguang weapon tier list to be informative and it helps you when it comes to picking your weapon of choice. Again, please do play around with the Ningguang calculator and let me know in the comments below if you have any feedback on it. You can find the link for the calculator in the description below or under Ningguang spreadsheet in the Ningguang Discord server. People have been using it ever since I posted it last week, and I did fix some bugs such as the ascended character and weapon level not registering in the formulas correctly. Any feedback on this video is welcome as well. I'll be going over the tool in more detail for the next video. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!